Okay, I want to talk about Wukong next, mainly because I'm playing a lot of Black Myth Wukong and I'm loving it. So I wanted to just talk about him some more. It's also kind of interesting playing that game and learning more about the character and seeing how well they actually implemented these talents in the game. It's pretty cool. So how I do the tier list is there's like three main things I think about for placing a talent. First is how good is the talent on its own? Like if it's not in its specific build, how good is it going to perform by itself? Second is how good is the talent in its build? How much does everything else boost it up? And then lastly is in its build, when would you want it to come? Is it like a level 2 or 3 talent that you really want for the build? Or is it probably like a 7, 8, or 9 talent that you just pick up because it adds a little bit? So starting with these starting talents as well, they also have a bit more comparison with each other because you can only have one of these where all the other talents you could get in a run. Yeah, you're only going to have one of these through the entire thing, so if one of them's a lot better than the others, it's probably going to push the other ones down. And starting with Stone Monkey, this makes it so when you parry, you will actually reflect some of the damage back to enemies. It is a quest as well. You have to do it 40 times. It's not that hard to build that up because like the Dagger Cultist, you can stack that up really easily by just spamming your block 5 times over and over. They recently nerfed this. It used to do like 10 stagger, whatever that means, 10 to like the stagger bar. Now it only does 1. So it does stagger enemies a lot slower and it's not really made for that anymore. It's just reflecting the damage. You also do get 20 armor for completing the quest, which is nice. I think that's very helpful on Wukong. I think it's like A or B tier. I'm not entirely sure. I think I'm gonna go A tier. It is good, and in his builds that use a lot of like block-based things, it does help out quite a bit. But I don't think it is S tier. I think he does have a talent that falls into that position that kind of needs to be reserved for that. And that is Thirst for Immortality. Basically, if you're not comfortable with Wukong's block or parry, I would recommend taking Supreme Polarity or Thirst for Immortality, probably Thirst for Immortality the most. When you get 7 magical objects at rare quality or above, you get, it's a quest as well, you get 100 vitality for completing that, and then 25 more for each upgrade that you get. Wukong plays really well going Horn of Plenty and Ogre Blood, like most characters, to get more health and damage, but it's especially helpful on Wukong just because you take more damage in your Yang stance. You take your 50% more damage, so it is valuable just stacking your HP and trying to like negate that. And this is probably the most efficient and easiest way to survive by playing Wukong, by just taking this and having a big HP pool. So I think it is really good. It also just works with every single build. Like every build will benefit from this. The only build that won't is the one where you actually need Way of Awakening, but it is really good. Next I have Supreme Polarity. This is probably my favorite of his starting talents. I like taking it a lot. When you switch stances with Wukong, you get Strength. When you go into Yang stance, you get Strength, which is 25% more damage. You do 100% more damage in that. And then this also buffs your damage at Legendary. This is 35%. So right off the bat, switching, like I start most camps in Yin stance, which is the defensive one where you get lifesteal. Then I switch to Yang stance to have that strength up as I start a camp to just try to clear as many things as I can right away. This just helps with that, and it stacks with a couple things like if you play how I play and you take Mantra of Balance as well, it's just really good. If you take Mind Fortress, which extends how long your strength lasts, it's really good. It also just plays into how you should already be playing Wukong. Like it just encourages Wukong's play the normal way, so I like this. Now recently I did a Way of Awakening build. I called it Awoken. It's just chapter 3, but it had everything you would want in this. It had Frost Tiger, Fiery Dragon, Divine Palm, Mantra of Balance, Fiery Golden Eyes, and what did I have? Mind Fortress and Resonance. This, after 10 blocks, when you do a stance change, you go into the Way of Awakening stance where you get the benefits from both stances. So you will get your shield and strength. You will also do 100% more damage and you'll do lifesteal. But it also triggers any other effects that trigger on trait, like Fiery Dragon. Or no, that's not what it does. I mean, when you do it, your trait will trigger both things, like Fiery Dragon and Frost Tiger if you have both of them, because it's technically both stances. If you have Mantra of Balance, it will apply Vulnerable and Weaken to enemies. If you have Divine Palm, a block within the 0.2 seconds will do both damage and heal you. And then Resonance, if your special ends, it'll trigger the effects of your trait. that'll get you shield and strength again, and do another fiery dragon and frost tiger explosion if you have that. At first, I did the tier lists for all characters before making the videos just to see and then play with them, and whatever I ranked at like D or C or B, I wanted to try again to see how well it would actually perform, and this was pretty good. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. It's really easy to stack up and get your 10 blocks as well to get this Way of Awakening stance. It's a lot easier than you think it would be. So if you get the build for this, it is really, really good. Next is Airbender. This makes your power just do one more like attack for each level. So 7, your power will like bounce between 7 enemies at max level. It's good. I don't think it's S tier. I think it is high A tier though. You also have intangibility after you use your power, after you connect with the first enemy. And that is really cool because if you have a bunch of power charges, you can just be bouncing between enemies over and over and over and not be able to actually be hit. The area where I don't think it goes into S is if you don't have power damage, if you're not investing in your power, taking this with like any other build is not an S tier pick in my mind. It doesn't actually do a whole lot of damage if you haven't been investing in your power. There's also another power talent that I think is just a little bit better for it. Another reason is if you don't have focus strikes and you just take this and you're in a boss fight and it's not the final boss, it doesn't do anything for you for the most part. I mean, in like the tentacles, like the first boss it does, and it can with the eyeballs in the second boss, but in damage phase, it won't do anything for you. Next is Celestial Pillar. This, at the end of your combo chain, you just do a big smack, like a big AoE smack. It's okay, like it's good damage, but one of the things is with Wukong, he's the only character that you can continue your combo chain and like dodge in between it. So you can attack like 3 times, dodge, and then do your next smack. But a lot of times you'll interrupt yourself doing this by using your power or by like stopping to block something or using your special, or you just have to dodge out of the way of an attack and you don't re-engage in time to get this off. And I feel like a lot of times it just takes way too long to actually get this full attack off. And the final attack that he has, it's like a big smack in a line. You could hit a lot of enemies with that. It is an AoE as well, just kind of in a straight line. This, I don't think it's really necessary. In the attack build, it's cool. It does combine with ringing beads to be a really, really hard hit, but I just don't think it's necessary at all, and I'd rather take pretty much every single other talent before taking this in most builds. Now, Stick Twirl is decent. I don't think it's amazing. You basically, after you dash, you twirl your stick and you can hit enemies in an AoE. It is nice. It does help in like camps that Wukong struggles in, like birds or the goblin camps that just have a lot of enemies that Wukong's attacks do have a little bit of AoE to them, but you really need to be pretty stagnant to get his full attack chain off, and sometimes that just gets you killed. So this does help with that. It also combines with ringing beads as well. If you have ringing beads up and you dash and hit, all the beads are going to be triggered multiple times in a row. So it is really helpful for just clearing big camps of people, but I don't think it's as good as any of the A tier talents. Now Sprint, I also just have to put in B. This can be really good if your build's around it. Your movement speed is boosted, and then when you dash, instead of having like a dash that goes from here to here, your dash will probably take you like this far and you run pretty fast. If you have a bunch of Vajra, if you have Ring of Dispel, if you have Witch's Broom, and it's the one Swan Cloak, if you're going like a full dash build, it's probably A. Well, it probably makes it. I don't even know if that build is S tier. It is a good build, it's fun to use, but just in general, in like most builds, it's probably just B tier. It's good. One of the interesting things about it as well is you don't really realize how much the movement speed is going to save you time in getting from camp to camp, and how much extra time you'll have at the end of clearing all the camps if you do have good clear speeds. Like, I have finished all the camps with 6 minutes left in the first chapter with having Sprint in a pretty good build once, so it is good in that sense. You just can get a lot of experience because you're moving quicker, but I don't think it's too amazing. Now, Mantra Balance, I think this is S tier. It's vulnerability, and it's good vulnerability that lasts for quite a bit and affects a lot of enemies. When you use your special, if you're in your Yin stance, the defensive stance, it'll make all the enemies around you vulnerable. If you're in the Yang stance, it'll make them weakened. It does make sense to weaken them in the Yang stance because you do take more damage, but what I prefer doing is starting every encounter in the Yin stance, using my special so that everything's vulnerable, then switching stances. If you have Supreme Polarity, that's 25% vulnerability, that's 25% from strength, that's 100% from this stance, and then that's 35% from this. It's just a lot of damage right off the bat. And for the most part, you can take out all of the like fodder enemies pretty quickly and then focus on the elites. So I think it's an S tier. I think most talents that give vulnerability on characters that don't already have it, like Pied Piper or Aladdin, I think most of those talents are S tier just because it's such a good debuff. Now, Resonance I value pretty highly. It buffs your special damage, which isn't the thing I like about it. Your special damage is normally okay. What makes your special builds better a lot of times is having Ring of Beads and having a good attack build. The other things you have for your special are Sacred Seal, I think it's called. But this actually isn't affected by your special damage. This is just your regular damage number. Taking Jack of whatever it is won't actually increase the damage. So this doesn't do a whole lot for your builds. I don't think investing in special damage is the best thing to do with Wukong, but what it does is when your special ends, all effects of your trait are re-triggered. So that's like Fiery Dragon if you have that. Yeah, and Yang Stance, that's your strength as well. If you have Mind Fortress, which at max, I think this is 8 seconds for strength, you can have strength for 8 seconds, trigger your special, have it end and get another 8 seconds. So it's 16 seconds in your Yang Stance, which is really, really beneficial because it's a lot quicker than switching to your Yin stance, being in the defensive stance, and then switching back into the Yang stance, especially if you haven't taken a hit and you're still at full health in Yang stance. Combines really, really well with the Way of Awakening build. I think it's a really good talent. You kind of need some things to have it be working, or you want to add things to this, like you want to add Fiery Dragon, you want to add Mind Fortress, but I think it is it's a really good pickup. You have pretty good odds at getting something that will affect this through an entire run. So yeah, it's pretty good in my mind. Now, Ringing Beads I also value quite a bit. I think it's one of the things that makes the special build, if you're going for it, it's kind of a necessity. This and attack damage you put. When you use your special, all these beads around you, every time you use your attack, they'll do their own like separate attack around you. So it makes the AoE of the beads just a lot bigger and it does a lot more damage because it's based off your attack, which is cool because now you can scale with Ace of Spades and your regular damage to increase this. Yeah, it's really nice for Wukong just because I think he struggles with the camps where there's a lot of little enemies, like the birds attacking around you and stuff. So this just really, really helps with that. It's also really, really good stagger. Like if you're fighting against crabs in the second chapter, this really helps stagger them. It's a pretty good talent. His special build is okay if you combine it with Mantra of Balance. So yeah, you do what I said, start in Yin stance, trigger your special so that everything's vulnerable, switch to your Yang stance. This is going to start hitting really, really hard. I like it quite a bit. Now, Thundercloud is just extra damage on your power. After your power hits an enemy, there's a little bit of a delay and then a lightning strike will happen. It's good, but say you have Airbender and you have 7 powers and then you take this, it's 20% of your power's damage. So you would need to equivalent like 5 of your Airbender hits, or I mean, 1 of your Airbender hits is equivalent to 5 lightning strikes. So it's not that much. I mean, you can upgrade that and get that to be more damage. And it equates to like all your lightning strikes is around 3 strikes of your power, which still is good. But I don't think it's as necessary as getting Airbender and Focus Strikes. I think these are the 2 that you want first. It is cool if you have Focus Strikes and you are attacking a boss because now you're guaranteeing pretty much that all these are hitting the boss. But again, I think it's what you'd want after. It is a little bit of AoE, but again, it's just not a whole lot of damage to start off with. You kind of want the other abilities first. I would say it's probably better than Sprint. I would take it in most builds before Sprint, but I don't think it's amazing. It is really good if you do have the full power build. It does start adding a lot of damage, but if you don't have the power build, I would prefer taking Airbender or Focus Strikes before this. Now, Mind Fortress is situationally good. I think Mind Fortress becomes a lot better if you have Resonance. If you don't, then it's just extending your strength to 8 seconds and your shield duration. I don't think that matters nearly as much. I think you mainly take Mind Fortress for the strength. And that being said, its benefit in my mind is very dependent on you having Resonance. If you don't have it, then I don't think it's that worth it. I normally only take it after I have Resonance, just so that it can trigger again while I'm in Yang stance. It does make it so that your strength can last 100% longer, which is nice. That's just 25% more damage, but again, I think it's situationally dependent. It is also cool if you do have Way of Awakening because you will trigger both the strength and the shield for you, though I don't think in Way of Awakening stance the shield is even that necessary because you already have the lifesteal with the 100% more bonus damage. Now, 1-inch punch, this is after you parry. you can retaliate with a punch that does starting 600% more damage and upgrades 150% more attack damage. Yeah, based off your attack. This is really, really good. You basically have it at all times. You just need to get off a parry, which is how you already play Wukong. There are some bosses that you can kind of abuse this, like the ogre in the second chapter. Like after it stomps, you can parry and then punch, parry and then punch, parry and then punch. It's also a AoE. It does a pretty decent size punch in front of it that can hit a lot of enemies. It's really, really good stagger as well. I don't think it combines with ringing beads though, which is really, really sad because I would love this. It's like 1000% more damage of your attack or something. And I would love to parry and then punch with ringing beads and have all of these beads trigger around you and hit for insane damage. Unfortunately, I don't think it stacks, but I hope it's meant to stack and that it's just not stacking for some reason, because I would love to see that in the 1.0 release. I like this talent quite a bit. It's one of those talents that I think whatever your build is, it will always work because 600% of your attack, even if you don't have any attack, is still good damage and it is an AoE. So I think this can fit into any build. In a defense and attack focused build, it is also phenomenal. Like it really stands out. Frost Tiger is the worst fiery dragon. I think it's probably below Mind Fortress. I would actually prefer Mind Fortress over it. Once you trigger your yin stance, it will do a like icy explosion around you that chills enemies, which is nice because it slows enemies down. And normally if you're going into your yin stance, I imagine it's because you're at low health. So it is nice to slow enemies down to try to get some lifesteal pretty easily from them. Normally I don't want to have to switch into my yin stance. I try to play Wukong in a way where, again, you're bound to at some point, but also normally when you're triggering this, you're running away from enemies. So it's not like you're triggering it and trying to get a lot of damage in as they're chilled. You're normally trying to avoid damage. So again, it is good in like the AoE aspect of things, and it does combine with Wave Awakening, but I just think in general you'll get more use out of Fiery Dragon, which I think is pretty high A tier. And I think this because I try to trigger this pretty much in every encounter. If you start in the yin stance and you're starting your encounter switching to yang stance, you're going to have this Fiery Dragon explosion hitting basically, yeah, every single time you go into an encounter. If you have Mantra Up Balance, you are now, I would make things vulnerable by using my special, then trigger this so it gets that 25%, it gets your strength buffs. If you have Supreme Polarity, it gets that buff. It hits really hard, and base damage, if you just look at their damage numbers like what they do individually, Fiery Dragon does more damage than Frost Tiger, and then it gets all the buffs from your Yang stance. So it's really good. It can start off a camp by basically having the fodder enemies either killed if they're like goblin camps, or if it's say pigs or something. You can probably, if you have the full setup, do 50% or more to them. I think it's a really good talent. So I also forgot to mention, because it's not on here, there is Ohm. I'll talk about it at the very end, but it's a talent that makes your special grow in radius, and all enemies hit inside that radius. Basically how Ringing Beads works, or I mean how your special works, if this is you where you're standing and your special beads are hitting around here, only enemies that are actually touching those beads will be affected. If there's an enemy right here that isn't touching the beads, they won't take damage. Ohm changes that and makes it so anyone within the area takes damage, and it makes that area a bit bigger, like that. Ringing Beads has like a weird thing. I don't know if it's a bug or not. It has something that, it seems, I've had this before, where if you have Ohm and Ringing Beads, sometimes when you hit, say like this top bead and this bead, will both hit the same enemy and trigger like multiple times as they hit the enemy. I don't know. I've had it before where I've just completely deleted enemies, and it feels like it might be a bug. If it's not, then that combination is just really, really strong. But that's another reason why I have Ringing Beads so high. So next, moving on to Divine Palm. I also value this a lot. I think it's an S tier take. I think it's another one of those talents that, because a defense build is mainly just taking Stone Monkey and these two, it's not really a build. It's just kind of like an aspect of improving what you should already be doing with Wukong. This, in my mind, is potentially a little bit better than 1-inch punch, because say 1-inch punch, well, and why it's below it though, because I also order these in what I think. Why it's below it is 1-inch punch can scale with attack as well. So if you're taking attack damage, then 1-inch punch is going to be better. But if you're not taking attack damage, I think this is better because it's a lot of damage. You have to use a parry within 0.2 seconds, but you can spam that over and over and over and get multiple parries. How Wukong's block works, say you have a dagger cultist that has the 5 attack combo, and you only use this on the first hit of the combo, then yeah, it's only going to trigger once. When you actually get a successful block, your block is reset, so if something else hits within that 0.5 second duration, it's going to re-trigger your block, but it doesn't act as if it's a new block, it acts as if it's the same. Sorry if this is kind of confusing. But if you block the first attack within 0.2 seconds and get this to trigger, and then you actually press the button again to block right before the next one, you can just block over and over and over and trigger this. It does lifesteal in the yin stance, it does damage in the yang stance. It does a lot of damage. It is a lot of damage, and sometimes if you're just in the middle of a big group of enemies, you can kind of just hit your block button over and over and over and trigger this multiple times and kill an entire group of enemies just from this talent. It's something that I don't really think it needs a build around it. It is fun if you do a build around it and you are taking more defensive stuff, but I really value this talent. I think it's a lot of damage, and again, it just falls into the aspect of you should already be playing Wukong this way, and this is a thing that just buffs what you're already doing. You don't need to like have extra stuff for it. So focus strikes, I was debating on this being A tier or S tier. I think it's S tier. Why focus strikes is so good, let me remind myself on the amount of damage that it does. So power can be held to deliver the next strike to the same target and deals 12% damage. Why it's S tier is because against the boss and damage phase where you don't have things to bounce off of, you normally don't get to use your power's full ability. This allows you to, if you don't have airbender, you actually get to hit the 3 hits on the boss. If you do have airbender and you have it leveled up, that's 7 hits on the boss. If you have thundercloud, all of these are guaranteed to hit the boss because the boss isn't moving and you're right there. This in a power build as well helps you just delete enemies. Like you can find an elite, hit them and them 7 times in a row. If you start from a distance, they recently nerfed how Wukong's stagger works on his power. The greater the distance you cover, the more stagger that it's going to do. So before you just used to be able to instantly stagger something with this. Now you can't, but it is still really good. Again, it's better than airbender in my mind because these two, when compared to a build that doesn't have any power damage or power talents, this is more effective in boss fights. This isn't. It also kind of made his power build nuts because again, you are intangible the second you hit an enemy, so you can be intangible just smacking the like most threatening enemy over and over and over and avoid all their damage. Okay, next is Sacred Seal. I feel like a lot of people really like this talent. I like it as well, but I wish it was based off special damage and not just your damage number, because then you can scale it with your regular damage number and special, and you can benefit from like getting a stack of Jack of Clubs, or no, it's Jack of Diamonds. You can benefit from like the crit chance, the 40% crit chance that you get from that. You don't get that with this, which is just unfortunate to me. I wish it stacked. Basically, once your special is over, the beads sink into the ground, and then after a little bit, just do an AoE explosion. If you take a lot of damage and you want to get out and get away from enemies, sometimes you might just be running away from enemies as this sinks into the ground and it only hits like 1 enemy compared to 5 or something. This does combine with Olm. Olm makes the area of effect of your special just a lot bigger. You do get a pretty massive size like area of effect when this sinks into the ground when you have Olm. If you have Olm, I would say it probably is A tier, but I don't know, it kind of functions how Grand Finale does for Pied Piper, but Grand Finale is just a bit better in my opinion because you already want to be kiting things around you with Pied Piper special. You do with Wukong's special, you want to stay in the middle of a bunch of enemies, but it's not as safe if you miss your block or something, and just because Wukong takes more damage than other characters. So I don't know, I think it's B tier. This might be a little bit of a controversial pick. I love Chi Outburst. Yeah, Chi Outburst. So this, after you use your power, you have about like 2 or 3 seconds to use it, and you get to charge this beam and shoot this large beam. You can charge it to do more damage as well, but it just shoots through a whole bunch of enemies. Why I really like it is it gives Wukong some range. It's also an AoE like laser beam. It does a lot of damage as well. If you were scaling your power damage, this hits so hard. I just really like that you can attack enemies from a distance when you're using this. Like, use your power. Sometimes your power ends in a really unfortunate time where an enemy just hits you as you are no longer intangible, and you get to dodge out and then laser beam them back. Yeah, it just can really scale to be a lot of damage. I feel like this list is probably a bit controversial to some people. I feel like people are going to like Thundercloud more. I feel like people are going to value Sprint more. I feel like people aren't going to value some of these as much as I do. I also like it in his builds that aren't power builds, just as something bonus. I think it just does pretty good damage overall. So like I would even take this in a build that isn't a power build. Now, Fiery Golden Eyes, this reveals 2 locations at the start of every day and night cycle on your map, which can be pretty beneficial because it can show you like, hey, there's a tumor on this far right side and you don't need to go to that because, well, for me personally, I don't do the tumors, but if you're doing them and you want to save them for last, it's like, hey, you don't need to go to that, go to that at the very end and you can save yourself some time. The other benefit is that it gives you at legendary 35% more dream shards, at common 20%. That's really, really good. That's like completing golden egg. This really just depends when you get it. It's S tier if you get it at level 2 or 3. The only reason why it wouldn't be good at level 2 or 3 is if you need something, like if you don't feel super confident with Wukong and you need something that's going to help your damage, like Fiery Dragon or Airbender or 1-inch Punch to like benefit your clear speeds. If you feel confident with Wukong, it's definitely an S tier. If you get it at level 8 or 9, it's still beneficial. Like it's always beneficial to have more dream shards. I think you can play without it though, because there are things like golden egg, there's things like hope diamond, leprechaun coin. There is a lot of ways to make money that I don't think you necessarily need to take one of your talents. I have it at the very end of B tier. Understand that it could be up here in S, up here in A, depending on when you get it, but I just think in general, you don't need it. If it comes early, I normally do take it. If it comes late, I normally won't take it unless the build doesn't need anything else. The last talent not on here is Ulm. While special is active, beads gradually increase their action radius up to 24% and hit all enemies present in the area. I don't actually know what each upgrade does. I think it's like 12% or something for each upgrade of this. So the area does become pretty good, but all enemies in present area are hit. Again, I've said there is like a weird interaction with ringing beads that seems to happen where you can stack damage over and over and over. It is beneficial as well with Sacred Seal, and just, yeah, having a much bigger area, making sure all enemies inside it are hit is good. I would say it's probably in A tier. I like it actually quite a bit. I would say it's right around here. I don't know, one of these 3, just slotted in somewhere. I do feel like this list is going to be, I don't know, you have me make this list like 2 weeks from now. I'm probably tiering things differently. I think Wukong has a really good balance of all of his talents. I think the devs did a great job. I don't think there's a single talent he has that's like chorus in my mind where, yeah, you should pick that every single time and it just really helps you delete things in the build. Or like freezing trap. I don't think he has a talent like that. I think all of them just very nicely incrementally add damage to your build and just do something unique that brings a little bit more. I really, really like all of Wukong's talents, but though he has a lot of S tiers, I don't think any of these S tiers are on like the same category as Chorus or something. I don't know, I feel like this is a controversial list, but Wukong's kind of hard to tier for me just because of how well he is built. So I was doing some builds on the other videos. I only think I'm going to do this one because like his power build, take Focus Strikes as quick as possible, take Airbender as quick as possible, take Thundercloud, and take Chi Outburst. It's like, take the talents that talk about power. You know, you want to go a special build, take Resonance, take Mantra of Balance, take Ringing Beads, Stick Twirl, and yeah, take Sacred Seal. Like it's kind of just take the things that affect the thing. But because this is like one of the more unique builds, I wanted to talk about this one. The Way of Awakening build, again, this gives you the effects of both stances when you trigger it. I really like taking Mantra of Balance because you can apply both Weaken and Vulnerable to enemies. Take Fiery Dragon and Frost Tiger so that when you trigger this stance, it does both effects. Take Resonance pretty early as well. This would be your level 6. It's okay if you get it before, because at the end of your special, it re-triggers those effects. So if you have both of these and you're in this stance, those will both be triggered again. Take Divine Palm if you can for a defense that does both damage and heals you. If you get Fiery Golden Eyes, it's pretty good. Like it's just you don't really need any of the other things. You can add this to your build. And then I just think Mind Fortress is also beneficial because if you're in this stance, you'll get both the strength and the shield from it. This build is really, really fun to play and really encourages blocks and stance changes, which I really, really like about Wukong. So this is the only one that I have to show off that like get it in this order. So level 1 if you can, 2, 3, 4 ultimate, take whatever you want, doesn't really matter. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, something if you can't do that, or just add that right there if you get that. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know on the tier list if you had any changes that you would make. Again, these are just my opinions. I do feel like Wukong is the most like varied tier list that I would make. Again, if I make this next week, probably looks a little different, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. All right, peace.